Michael Turner thought he had married the perfect woman, but on the second night of their honeymoon, a single discovery about his new bride, Lila Brooks, turned love into horror and passion into bloodshed. In a luxury New York hotel suite meant for romance, truth became a weapon, and, within hours, a beautiful love story ended in a brutal act that would shock the entire city. Michael Turner had always believed that love came once in a lifetime, and when he met Lila Brooks, he thought he had found his forever. She was radiant, elegant, and carried a kind of quiet grace that made her stand out in a crowd. They met 6 months before their wedding at a charity gala in Manhattan, where Michael had been attending as a sponsor for his company's fundraiser. Lila worked for the events organization team, and their connection was immediate. She was intelligent, confident, and spoke with warmth that drew him in instantly. From that night forward, their relationship grew rapidly. Dinners turned into weekend trips, and by the third month, Michael was certain she was the one. Their wedding took place on a sunny afternoon in June, held in a small garden outside the city. Friends and family described the ceremony as pure and heartfelt, the kind of love that looked destined to last. Lila's long white dress shimmered under the sunlight, and her eyes glistened with emotion as they exchanged vows. Michael couldn't stop smiling. He was proud, overjoyed, and ready to start a new chapter. What neither of them knew was how quickly that chapter would end. 2 days later, they arrived in New York City for their honeymoon, checking into the luxurious Parkview Hotel, overlooking the skyline. It was supposed to be a perfect escape to newlyweds, celebrating love in one of the world's most romantic cities. Michael had planned everything meticulously. Fine dining, a night on Broadway, and a surprise evening boat cruise along the Hudson River. To him, it was the start of forever. The first night was magical. They shared champagne on the balcony, watching the lights of the city dance against the water. Lila appeared calm and joyful, though there were moments when she seemed distant, lost in thought. Michael noticed but assumed it was the exhaustion from the wedding chaos. He brushed it aside, focusing instead on the happiness of the moment. They made plans for the next day: shopping in Soho, a walk through Central Park, and dinner at one of Manhattan's top restaurants. Everything seemed perfect, at least on the surface. But beneath the laughter and romance, something fragile lingered. Lila carried a secret she had hidden for months, one she feared could destroy everything she had built with Michael. She had promised herself she would tell him before they married, but every time she tried, her courage failed. She had fallen deeply in love, believing that once he truly knew her heart, the rest wouldn't matter. Now, with a ring on her finger, and the world believing their love story, the truth felt heavier than ever. As Michael slept that first night, she sat by the window, staring at the glowing city below. The hum of traffic echoed faintly as she held a small envelope in her hands, one that contained documents she could no longer ignore. She had meant to tell him before the wedding, before they became husband and wife. But fear kept her silent. She knew secrets could destroy, but she didn't yet understand how violently they could unravel a life. By the time dawn broke over the New York skyline, the stage was already set for tragedy, and neither of them had any idea how close the darkness truly was. The morning of their second day began like any other honeymoon morning should. Sunlight poured through the hotel curtains, casting a soft glow across the room. Michael ordered breakfast in bed: croissants, fruit and coffee, trying to make the day as romantic as possible. Lila smiled and thanked him, her voice light, but her hands trembled slightly as she held her cup. Michael didn't notice at first. He was too caught up in the excitement of being a newlywed in the city of dreams. But as the morning wore on, her quiet unease became harder to ignore. They spent the day exploring Manhattan, hand in hand, visiting museums, and laughing as they tried street food vendors along the way. From the outside, they were the picture of happiness, but Lila's thoughts were elsewhere. Every time Michael smiled, guilt twisted inside her. The secret she carried had begun to consume her. She had told herself for weeks that honesty would come once they settled into married life, that love could conquer everything. But now, the fear of rejection paralyzed her. She could feel the truth pressing against her chest like a weight she could no longer bear. That evening, they returned to their suite at the Parkview Hotel. The city lights shimmered through the glass, and Michael poured 2 glasses of champagne to toast their new beginning. As he stepped away to answer a quick call, Lila's eyes fell on her small travel bag resting on the bed. Inside it, hidden among her clothes, were the papers she had been dreading to face. Her birth certificate, medical records, the truth of who she had been before she became Lila Brooks. She had kept them locked away for months, unable to destroy them but terrified of them being found. Now, her heart raced as she stared at the zipper, debating whether to move them to a safer place. Her hand hesitated, and in that moment, Michael turned back toward the room. His expression softened when he saw her flustered, and she forced a smile to mask her panic. She excused herself to take a shower, hoping to calm her nerves. As the sound of running water filled the room, Michael noticed her bag left slightly open. He hadn't meant to pry, at least, not at first. But curiosity crept in. They had shared everything, or so he believed. So why had she looked so anxious all day? His hand hovered for a moment, then pulled the zipper back. What he found inside changed everything. The documents felt out of place among her perfume bottles and silk scarves. His eyes scanned the papers, confusion turning to disbelief. The name listed on the birth certificate was not Lila Brooks. The gender marker, red male. For a long moment, he simply stared, frozen between comprehension and denial. It felt impossible, unreal, like a cruel mistake. His chest tightened, breath quickened, and the room began to blur. When Lila stepped out of the bathroom minutes later, wrapped in a towel, Michael stood motionless, his face pale, the papers clenched in his shaking hands. The air between them changed instantly. Something invisible but heavy filled the room. Her eyes widened as she realized what had happened. Everything she had feared had come true. The truth was out, and love was no longer enough to protect her. The honeymoon had just become the beginning of a nightmare. The silence that followed was suffocating. Michael's mind reeled as he stood there, gripping the papers that had destroyed his reality. Every word printed on them blurred before his eyes, but the meaning was clear enough to shatter him. The woman he had fallen in love with, the woman he had promised his life to, was not who he thought she was. Rage surged through his veins, colliding with disbelief and heartbreak. His heart pounded violently in his chest as 1,000 questions erupted inside him. Why she had T told him how she could deceive him, and how their entire relationship could have been built on what he now saw as a lie. Lila froze, her towel clutched tightly as she stared at him, panic flooding her expression. She tried to speak, but Michael's trembling hands and the fury in his eyes made her step back. Her secret, the one she had spent years protecting, was no longer hers. She could feel the air in the room growing colder, heavier, filled with something dangerous. She wanted to explain, to tell him how much she loved him, and how terrified she had been of losing him. But she could see that he was no longer the same man. Michael turned away, pacing across the room. The memories of their wedding, their laughter, and their vows now felt poison. He saw flashes of their moments together, her smile, her tenderness, their intimacy, and each one twisted painfully inside him. The realization cut deeper than anything he'd ever felt. He felt betrayed, humiliated, and broken. The woman he had thought was his perfect bride now stood before him as a stranger. Lila reached out, tears streaming down her face, but he recoiled. The sound of his breathing filled the room as he struggled to control the storm building within him. He wanted to leave, to walk out and never return, but something darker began to take root in his mind. His emotions spiraled from heartbreak to anger, and from anger to something far more dangerous. The hotel room, once filled with the warmth of their honeymoon, now felt like a trap. The dim light from the city poured through the window, reflecting off the blade of a small decorative knife that lay on the minibar part of the hotel's fruit arrangement from earlier that evening. Michael's gaze drifted toward it unconsciously, his thoughts blurring between reason and rage. He felt deceived, stripped of control, and his mind searched desperately for a way to make the pain stop. Lila backed away, her sobs echoing softly, her voice trembling as she tried to calm him, but the distance between them only widened. Michael's hands shook violently as he gripped the edge of the counter, his knuckles white. He could feel himself losing control, his thoughts consumed by betrayal. Every heartbeat echoed with anger, every second with the crushing realization that the life he thought he had was an illusion. In that moment, something inside him broke completely. The love that once filled him had turned to poison. The sound of her pleading voice faded into the background as he took a step toward her, his eyes cold and unrecognizable. The city outside continued to hum, unaware that in that luxury hotel suite, a moment of unbearable truth was about to turn into something irreversible. Love had turned to hatred, and in the quiet heart of New York, tragedy was waiting to unfold. The next morning, the Parkview Hotel awoke to routine sounds, maids knocking on doors, luggage carts rolling down the hall, and guests heading out for breakfast. No one suspected that behind the locked door of Suite 1704, a nightmare had already taken place. Hours earlier, the honeymoon suite had descended into chaos. What began as heartbreak had spiraled into uncontrollable rage. When police later reconstructed the scene, they would find overturned furniture, shattered glass, and crimson stains that told a story words never could. Lila Brooks had fought to survive. Her last moments were filled with terror and disbelief, her pleas drowned out by Michael's fury. The same man who had once promised to love and protect her had become unrecognizable, consumed by a violent madness that left no room for mercy. When it was over, Michael stood over her motionless body, the weight of what he'd done slowly sinking in. The knife clattered to the floor as his hands began to shake. His breathing was shallow, his heart pounding so loud it drowned out every sound around him. He stared at her for a long time, unable to process the scene. The woman who had been his everything now lay lifeless, her blood staining the soft carpet beneath her. The room smelled of iron and perfume, a haunting mixture that would forever define that night. Panic crept in, chasing away the haze of anger. He stumbled backward, knocking into a table, his thoughts spinning in fragments. Police, prison, headlines, shame. He hadn't planned this. It wasn't supposed to happen, but it had. Michael's instincts shifted from rage to survival. He moved quickly, wiping his hands with a towel, gathering his belongings. He packed his suitcase with trembling hands, not out of logic but desperation. His wedding ring lay on the floor near Lila's body. He didn't pick it up. He took her phone and smashed it, as if breaking it could somehow erase the reality of what he had done. Then, just before leaving, he took one last look at her. Her eyes were open, empty, staring toward the ceiling. Something inside him cracked again, but it was too late for remorse. At 3:07 a.m., hotel security cameras captured him leaving through a side exit. His face was pale, his expression blank. He walked quickly, carrying a single duffel bag, vanishing into the sleeping city. No one stopped him, no one knew. By morning, when housekeeping arrived, the "Do Not Disturb" sign was still hanging on the door. They knocked 3 times. Then again, when there was no answer, a supervisor used the master key. The door opened to a scene that would haunt every staff member who entered. The air inside was cold and heavy. Blood had soaked into the carpet, the champagne glasses from the night before still half full on the table. Lila's body lay near the bed, covered by the white hotel sheets she had once straightened neatly just hours earlier. The police were called immediately. The suite was sealed off, detectives arriving within minutes. Reporters would soon gather outside, cameras flashing as whispers spread through the lobby. Guests who had checked in for romance and luxury were now checking out in fear. A honeymoon had turned into a crime scene, and the man responsible had vanished into the night. What no one realized yet was that Michael's story was far from over. His disappearance would soon become one of the most talked-about manhunts in New York's history. For 2 days, Michael Turner's name dominated every major news outlet in New York. The honeymoon suite at the Parkview Hotel was sealed off. The once glamorous room, now a symbol of horror. Detectives pieced together the events from the night of the murder with chilling precision. Surveillance footage showed him leaving just after 3 a.m., wearing dark clothes, carrying a duffel bag, and moving with a frantic urgency that revealed more than words ever could. His car was later found abandoned near a quiet gas station on the outskirts of the city, its tank half full and keys left in the ignition. It was as though he had wanted to disappear completely, or didn't care if he was found. The city buzzed with speculation. Talk shows and online forums debated every aspect of the case. Some painted Michael as a man betrayed beyond reason, while others condemned him as a monster whose pride turned murderous. Yet in all the noise, one truth stood out. A woman was dead, and love had turned to blood. Police teams expanded the search across state lines. They followed a trail of small purchases: food, a bus ticket, a motel stay. Michael seemed to be wandering aimlessly, drifting further north each day. Witnesses described him as pale, unshaven, and quiet, keeping to himself. He paid in cash, avoided conversation, and spent nights staring out of windows as if lost in a trance. His mind had fractured under the weight of what he'd done. The man who had once believed in lifelong devotion now carried a kind of emptiness that nothing could fill. Meanwhile, the public learned more about Lila Brooks. Reporters uncovered her past, her courage, and her journey to becoming the woman she was. Friends and colleagues spoke of her kindness, her warmth, and the battles she had fought silently. Her transition, once private, became a headline, exploited by sensational media coverage that stripped her humanity away. While some mourned her with compassion, others twisted her story into fuel for cruel debates. But through the noise, those who truly knew her described her as a woman who wanted only love to be seen for who she was, not what she had been. A week after her murder, Lila's funeral was held in a small chapel in Brooklyn. Her family sat quietly in the front row, their grief raw and wordless. Photographs of her filled the room, her smile radiant, her eyes full of life. Outside, reporters gathered behind barricades, their microphones ready, their questions cold and relentless. The ceremony ended in silence, the city outside moving on as if nothing had happened. But for those who had known her, time had frozen on that night in the Parkview Hotel. 2 days later, police received a tip from a remote motel in upstate New York. A man matching Michael's description had checked in under a false name. When authorities arrived, the front desk clerk said he had paid for a single night, carrying only a small bag. Inside the room, detectives found signs of someone unraveling. The curtains were drawn shut, the mirror covered with a towel, and the bed covered in torn notebook pages. Scrawled across them in shaky handwriting were fragments of thought. She lied. I loved her. God forgive me. There was also a letter, folded neatly on the nightstand, addressed simply to the world. In it, Michael confessed to everything. He described the moment of discovery, his rage, his confusion, and his guilt. He didn't justify what he had done, he simply stated that he had lost control, that the truth had broken something inside him he couldn't repair. The final line read, I loved her. I just didn't know how to live with the truth. That same afternoon, a fisherman spotted a body floating in the Hudson River, not far from a desolate bridge. The police were called, and within hours, they confirmed it was Michael Turner. His death was ruled a suicide. In his pocket, they found his wedding ring and a water-damaged photo of him and Lila, on their wedding day, both of them smiling, unaware of the darkness waiting ahead. The case closed quietly, but the echoes of it lingered for years. The Parkview Hotel eventually remodeled the suite, renumbering it and redecorating to erase its past, but staff members claimed the room always felt colder than the others. Some said they could hear faint sobbing at night or catch the scent of Lila's perfume when no one was inside. The story of Michael and Lila became one of those haunting true crime cases that fascinated the public long after the headlines faded. Documentaries were made, podcasts retold the events, and experts debated the psychological unraveling that had led to the tragedy. Some argued it was a story of deceit and emotional collapse. Others said it was a reflection of prejudice, of how fear and shame could destroy even the strongest love. Years later, on quiet anniversaries, people would still leave flowers near the Hudson, where Michael's body was found, not out of sympathy for his crime, but out of sorrow for the tragedy itself. Love story poisoned by secrets, misunderstanding, and the fragile limits of human emotion. The tale of their 2-day honeymoon became a reminder whispered in true crime circles that sometimes the most dangerous truths aren't the ones we hide from others, but the ones we refuse to face within ourselves. In the heart of New York, among millions of stories, there's remained a haunting symbol of love turned fatale, a perfect marriage that never survived its second dawn.